Pancho, Panchito, tú eres mi amorcito. Ay, Pancho, Panchito, tú eres mi amorcito. Ay, Pancho, ay, Pancho.
Warning, the following videos aren't intended to hurt and or bully anyone. It's solely my job in salvation to report on what's going on with the YouTube community and give my opinion because my opinion matters. Sorry about that. Weenie Hut Jr. discretion is advised. So just a quick summary for the ones who are confused. This young lady was invited by Brawadis to hang out and she was exposing everything. And the reason we know it's Brawadis is because Jasmine commented the X and this girl was giving too much detail about the tattoo that Brawadis has, about the basketball playing, and everybody just assumed that this is Brawadis and Jasmine confirmed.
Get ready with me while I tell you about a bad date experience. Okay, before I do tell this story, I do want to mention that this guy is a YouTuber, and the reason why I'm mentioning that is so that way you guys can help me understand his mindset. Okay, so this all began on Instagram DM. In our first conversation ever, it was just, hey, what are you doing? Where are you from? And he had also mentioned how he wanted to show me around his house. After that first conversation, we didn't continue talking consistently, but he would slide up on my stories every here and there, and I would slide up on his every here and there. One day, he had asked me when I was going to be where he lives, and I had told him that I was actually going to be there that weekend. So then he told me that him and his friends had plans to go out, and he said even if they don't go out, to still go over to his house. So then the day comes and we had planned to see each other. So I had asked him if they've decided if they wanted to go out or stay in. That way I knew what to wear. So then he tells me that we were going to stay in and that he would pick me up from the hotel that I was staying at. So then once he got to the hotel, obviously I went outside and I got in his car, and we were actually 30 minutes away from his house. So for those whole 30 minutes, that whole car ride, we were just getting to know each other, and honestly it went really well. He was like, you do modeling, right? I saw your Instagram. And I was like, yeah, I do. He's like, how'd you get into modeling? You're just bad or what? And I kind of just started laughing. And I was like, you do YouTube, right? I saw your Instagram. And he was like, yeah. So then we get to his house and we park in his garage, and he had asked me if I like dogs because he has a dog. And I had told him yes, that I love dogs and that I have a dog. And he was like, okay, good, like cool, you know. So we get out of his car and we walk in his house. So then as soon as I walked in his house, I met his dog, who is super cute. And his friend was also there, and as soon as his friend saw me, his friend was like, oh my gosh, like, you know. And I kind of looked at him like, what? And he's like, I'm so sorry, but you're so pretty, you're beautiful. And I was like, oh, thank you. And inside I was like, yes, you know, because points. Long story short, his friend mentions a party, and they start asking me if I want to go to the party with them. They said if I didn't want to go, that we would just stay at the house and hang out, that they didn't mind doing whatever I wanted to do. And I had told them that I didn't mind either. If they wanted to go, we could, that I would just go with the flow. So then they tell me that they want to go to the party for an hour just to show face and then leave. And I had told them that that was fine with me. So then his friend tells him to take me to his closet to let me pick out a sweater since it was a little cold. So that's what we do. We go to his closet and he gives me one of his sweaters. And then after that, he ended up giving me a tour of his house. Then we walk back to his garage, and his friend actually drove us. So his friend was in the front, and then me and him were sitting in the back. And I was actually in the middle, and then he was next to me. The party was another 30 minutes away from his house. So for those whole 30 minutes, we were just in the back seat, vibing, getting to know each other. We had the same taste in music, which was pretty cool. And he had also put his hand on my lap to hold his hand, so I did. Once we got to the party, he held my hand walking into the party and while being at the party. The whole time that we were at the party, we didn't really get to talk because people were coming up to him every second asking for a photo with him. So that part kind of sucked, but the good part is that after he would take a photo, he would come up to me. He'd be like, "Are you okay? Are you good?" He was always checking on me, so that's good. Okay, I like telling my stories in detail, so I couldn't get it all to fit in this video, so I'm going to need to make a part 2 on how it ended. Get ready with me while I tell you about how my date went. Okay, so still at the party, we ended up sitting down, and these people had came up to us who were there at the party, and they had told us that we should go downtown with them. The guy that I was with kept telling them no, that he didn't want to be out late because he had promised his friends that he would be up at 7 a.m. to go play basketball with them. So then he had asked me if I wanted to go, and I had told him again that I don't mind. So he ended up getting convinced, and he tells me that we're gonna go for an hour, show face, and then leave. So since we had decided to go downtown, we had left the party, and again, me and him sat in the back seat, and as soon as his friends started driving, I noticed that the guy I was with didn't have his seatbelt on. And not to sound like a Karen, but I did tell him to put his seatbelt on. For one, obviously safety, and also because his friend's driving was kind of crazy. So then he looks at me and he's like, "Did you really tell me to put my seatbelt on?" And I was like, "Yeah, why?" And he's like, "No one's ever told me to put my seatbelt on. Just bury me already." For that whole car ride, he held my hand again. And even once we got downtown, he held my hand walking all the way to the club. While we were walking to the club, he was holding my hand, and out of nowhere, his friend comes up to me and he puts his arm around me and he starts walking away from the guy I was with. And he's just telling me, "Okay, right now, you're my girlfriend. I'm gonna buy you one of these roses." He's like, "You're with me right now." He's like, "I'm sorry, but he can't be seen with any girls right now. He just got out of a public relationship." And I was like, "Oh, okay," you know, and I turn around and it's because people were taking pictures of him. Once we got to the club, I kind of just let him be, and I just sat down just because of what his friend had told me, that he can't really be seen doing anything with anyone. I didn't want to seem boring, but I also didn't want to just be there dancing alone, so that's why I just sat down. So then he was like, "You're really quiet, aren't you?" And I was like, "No, honestly, there just hasn't been time to talk to you," because there hasn't. At the party, I couldn't, and then there at the club, I couldn't. The only time we were able to talk was in his car and at his house. And I'm gonna be honest, I am not that type of person to throw myself at someone. If I see that he's busy doing something, I'm not gonna throw myself at him. I'm gonna wait until he comes up to me or until he's done. So then the club was closing, so everyone starts leaving and we're just waiting. And as it's clearing out, the friend that we were with who was driving us, he spots a girl leaving in the crowd. And he starts tapping the guy that I'm with, like, "Look at her," you know, trying to get him to notice this girl. And he gives him no attention. He's minding his business, talking. And the friend goes up to the girl. He's like, "Let me get your number for my homie." And I was kind of shocked because I'm out with this guy and he's trying to get another girl's number for this guy while I'm with him right in front of my face. The girl ends up telling him no, so then we start walking out of the club. While we were walking out of the club, he sees her again, so he goes back up to her and again asks for her number, and this time he does end up getting it. So we walk back to his car, and once we got in his car, he was like, "Were you this close to leaving?" And I was like, "No, why?" And the reason why he said that was because when he had first picked me up on the way to his house, I had told him that I'm a homebody and I don't really like going out, especially clubbing. And he had told me he's the same way, so that's why he was kind of joking, like, "Were you this close to leaving?" And I had laughed and I was like, "No." He's like, "Did you have fun or did you want to leave?" I was like, "No, I had a good time." And then I was like, actually, I was this close to leaving. And he was like, what? Why? What did I do? He's like, I was loyal to you the whole night. And I was like, no, I know. I was like, you didn't do anything, but your friend over here. So then his friend was like, what? What did I do? And I told him like how I heard him and saw him get that girl's number for him. And I was just telling him like, look, you know, I'm not his girlfriend or anything, but out of respect, like that's pretty rude to do, you know? And he was like, I swear I didn't do that. He was trying his very best to convince me he didn't. And I was just like, you know what? Forget it. We're good. Everything's good. Like, forget it, you know? Call me crazy or dramatic or whatever. But you guys, to me, you just don't do that. Okay, again, I didn't get to finish telling the rest of this story. So I'm going to need to make a part 3, hopefully on how it ended. Get ready with me while I tell you how my date with the YouTuber went. Okay, so after me telling his friend about the whole club situation, we ended up going to the gas station because they needed to put gas in the car. They had both stepped out to put gas in the car, and I stayed inside the car waiting. While I'm sitting in the car waiting and they're putting gas, I could literally hear their conversation and what they're talking about. And basically, the guy that I was with was telling his friend that basically he was messing up the whole date for him, and he was asking him what he did. And the friend was just saying that he didn't do anything, and the guy that I was with just kept telling him that he was messing it up for him. Once they got back into the car, things kind of went back to normal. He was holding my hand, we were vibing, and at one point I was looking out the window just because I was looking around. There was a lot of people out, and he had grabbed me by the chin and turned my face towards him, and he had told me to, he was like, stop giving me attitude. And I started laughing because I was just looking out the window, honestly just looking around. I had noticed that it was almost 3 in the morning, so when we were on the way back to his house, I had asked his friend if he can drop me off back at the hotel. They were both like, no, like we're all gonna go back to the house, we're gonna chill for a bit. And the guy that I was with was like, yeah, like we told my dog that the 3 of us were gonna go back to the house together, so you're coming with us. So I was just like, okay, you know, that's fine. So once we got back to the house, we kind of just all went straight to the kitchen and we were just hanging out. On the way to his house, I had told him that I was hungry, but nothing was really open because obviously it was already really late. So he had told me that he had pizza at his house. So once we got there, we started eating pizza and they were just talking about how they both had a really good night. After that, the guy I was with went into his room and he didn't come back out for like 30 minutes. So I was just sitting on the table on my phone and his friend was sitting at another table on his phone. After he comes out of his room, again, we're just talking for like only a few minutes, and then he mentions how he needed to be up in a few hours to go play basketball with his friends, and then he goes back in his room. And I start telling his friend, like, should I leave, you know? Because, you know, when you have company and you want them to leave, but you don't want to tell them, so you just go hide in your room. I thought that that's what was happening, you know? But then I was confused because I had asked them to take me back to the hotel and they both told me no, that they wanted me to come back to the house. So I was confused and I didn't understand what was going on. So his friend was like, no, like, trust me, he wants you to be here, like, he's just stressed out right now, blah, blah, blah. So then he walks back out of his room. He walks out with his laptop, and I had told him, I was like, hey, I'm gonna get an Uber to go back to the hotel. And he was like, okay. And he goes and sits on the couch. And it's literally silent for like 5 minutes, silent. It was so awkward. The reason I had told him that I was gonna get an Uber and leave was because the whole night he kept mentioning how he had to be up in a few hours to go play basketball. So I was like, maybe he wants to go to sleep, you know, I was just being generous. And then he also just left me in the kitchen for like a whole hour and a half. and I'm just there, and then he comes and sits and it's quiet. Like, it was just weird, and I didn't want to overstay my welcome. I forgot to mention, right after I had told him that I was gonna Uber home, he had quickly gone back into his room, and he messages me his address, and he tells me, he's like, oh, here's my address for your Uber. If you want to stay though, you could stay. And I was like, why are you texting me? I'm literally in your kitchen. Like, you can tell me. So then that's when he walked out, and while he was sitting on the couch, I had gone up to him after it was quiet, and I was like, hey, like, is everything okay? He's like, yeah, why? I was like, are you sure? He's like, yeah. He's like, I'm just editing this video. And I was like, okay. And it stayed quiet. Because it was so quiet and awkward, and I could literally feel that the vibes changed, I went up to him and I was like, hey, do you mind if I wait outside for my Uber? And he was like, no. So then I go up to him and I was like, bye, it was nice to meet you. And he was like, it was nice to meet you. And I go outside. I kind of started thinking maybe it's because I said something about the club, but I didn't tell him anything. I told his friend. And also, after the whole club incident in the car, like, he was being all lovey-dovey. So I'm like, that can't be it. I literally don't know why his vibe changed, but I'll continue this story in part 4. Get ready with me while I tell you about how it went hanging out with the YouTuber. Okay, the reason why now I'm saying hanging out instead of date is because it wasn't a date. It was more of hanging out. Okay, once I had gone outside, his friend had followed me out to wait with me until I got picked up. For a few minutes, it was really quiet and super awkward. Then his friend was like, are you sure you want to leave? And I was like, yeah. He's like, okay. And he starts shaking his head and he's like, you're messing up. And I turn around and I was like, me? How am I messing up? And I was like, do you not see how he's acting? And he's like, no, yes, I do. He's like, you just don't understand. He's really stressed out. His YouTube video has to be up in the morning and something is wrong with it. So he's just trying to figure it out. And I said, how is that my fault? I said, he could have communicated with me. He could have told me like, hey, hold on, I need to figure something out really quick. But instead, he just decided to be weird and ignore me. Then he was like, okay, you know what? I don't know why he's treating you like that. If I had you here, I wouldn't be acting that way with you. He's like, I don't know what happened. And he asked me if I wanted to stay in his room because he had already been staying there for 2 weeks. And I had told him no. He's like, I'll sleep in the living room. We could take you back in the morning because it's getting late already. So I told him no. And then he was like, do you want me to go talk to him? And I said no, you know, because no, like with the way he was acting, I wanted nothing to do with him. Then he was like, hold on. And he goes inside and I just stay outside waiting. So then he comes back outside and he walks up to me and he was like, okay, this is what you're gonna do. You're gonna go back inside. You guys are gonna hug it out and both of you are gonna act like nothing happened. And I was literally so confused. I was like, what in the bipolar is going on here? So can you guess what I did? Yes, I ended up walking back into the house. Okay, I will for sure finish the ending of this story in part 5. Get ready with me. After we walked right back into the house, his friend had walked me into the guy's room because that's where he was. As soon as we got into his room, the friend leaves and closes the door. As soon as his friend closed the door, me and the guy at the same time, we were both like, what happened? And I had told him to tell me his side first. He was like, you were acting weird. And I was like, no, you were acting weird. Then he told me that he was just really stressed out about his YouTube video because it had to be up in the morning. And I had told him that that wasn't my fault, that he could have communicated it with me and he could have told me like to hold on or something. Then he brought up how I told him that I was gonna get an Uber. And he's like, yeah, and then you were the one who wanted to leave. He's like, I wasn't gonna force you to stay. If you wanted to leave, like, then that's up to you. And I had told him the only reason I was gonna leave was because of how you're acting. And I told him, like, you kept mentioning how you had to be up early, so I thought, like, you wanted to go to bed because you kept mentioning all night how you had to be up in the morning to go play basketball. So I was being generous, and I mentioned how he also just left me in the kitchen. He said that he had left me in his kitchen because he was trying to figure out his YouTube thing, and he was like, I'm sorry, I should have told you something, I should have communicated, you're right. And he had also said that he was making his bed. I do know for a fact that he was making his bed because as soon as we walked in the doors, he had walked to his laundry, and I heard his friend yell, why are you doing laundry right now? So he was probably getting his blankets, and that's when he went in his room to make his bed. Then he was like, can't you tell I was feeling you all night? And I was like, no, yeah, I can. But once we got here, that's when the switch up happened. And he was like, it was just because of my YouTube video. And then he wanted to leave. And I was just like, okay. And he was telling me that he thought I wanted to leave because I wasn't having a good time with him. And I had told him no, that the reason I wanted to leave was because of how he was acting. So then we kind of just both started laughing, and he was like, I think it's a misunderstanding from both sides. And I did agree with him that it was a misunderstanding because from my side, I'm over here thinking that he doesn't want me there. And then from his side, he's thinking that I didn't want to be there. So it was really like a communication thing, it seemed like. Then he gives me a t-shirt and some sweatpants, and I go in the bathroom to change. After I had already put on my shirt and pants, he just walks in the bathroom and he sees that I'm trying to tie the pants because they were really loose, and he grabbed the strings and he tied them for me. After that, he goes and sits on his bed, and before I sat on his bed with him, I put my clothes on the dresser right next to his bed, and I took my necklace off just because I don't like laying in my jewelry, and I put it on top of my clothes. So then we're sitting on his bed, literally just talking. So then after talking for a little bit, he was like, you're so hot, can I have a kiss? And I kind of giggled and I was like, no. Then he was like, wait, I see what you're doing. And I was like, what? And he was like, you're trying to punish me from earlier. He's like, that's kind of hot. Then I started laughing because that's funny. And I told him no, that I genuinely just didn't want to kiss him. He has a tattoo that says stay humble on his arm, and he was like, you really made me stay humble. I just thought that was so funny. He was so surprised that I didn't want to kiss him, and he had told me that he's never been denied a kiss before. He had asked me why I didn't want to kiss him, and I just told him the truth, that I don't just kiss anyone, and that I literally just met him that day. And you guys could call me innocent or whatever you guys want, but I really don't go around just kissing every guy I hang out with. And we let the whole kiss thing go, and we just continued talking the rest of the night. And throughout the night, I kept asking him like if he wanted to go to bed, just because I didn't want to be the one to keep him awake, and he kept telling me no, no, no. He wanted to keep talking, and he kept talking. Throughout the night, we kept talking about the whole incident that happened, and we were just laughing about it. And then he kept bringing up how he was super shocked how I didn't want to kiss him. He kept saying, damn, like... So even after I didn't want to kiss him, he still wanted to keep talking throughout the whole night. Our conversations were good, and it was just going really good. It was going so good that we ended up staying up until 7 a.m. just talking our lives away. So then finally at 7 a.m. he was like, okay, I'm tired. I'm gonna lay down for 30 minutes until 7:30 to go play basketball. So we both lay down and we just cuddled. I don't want to make this video too long, so I'm gonna leave it off here, and I'll continue the rest in the next part.